I guess I was thinking a little bit about the degree to which a gift can be imposed upon someone. And I guess that's maybe part of the meaning of the word gift is that gift unexpectedly arrives and you now have to do something with it, whether you either asked for the gift or not, and whether or not you really like that gift. There is a being gracious in light of an unasked for, unappreciated gift where someone else thought that they were doing you a favor. I think this question of big forgiveness. There was a time when I was on YouTube when I first began when I was asking the question of could your average Christian, whatever that expression means, could they forgive God if they suddenly discovered that there were no life after death? And I had many people chime in. Many people said no, they could not. There's too much injustice, too much hardship, too much suffering all the way around, that there needs to be some ultimate recompense in the end. And I felt that that was an unfortunate response. I do think, on the other side of that, there are many people who are unable to forgive, and so now they're, in my language, they're in some way holding themselves hostage in an attempt to blackmail a fantasy to give them a happily ever after. Um, People need to accept life's hardship, and I think part of the question is the difference between suffering per se and meaning. I think we are creatures of meaning, and meaning, it isn't removed from physical materiality, but we can't just locate it in the physical materiality. I think it is very similar to suffering, that the suffering of another, maybe it's more real, suffering is, that we can act with some predictable way and anticipate what would bring suffering to another. I think we have some assurance there. But not always, because there is a horizon of meaning available to people. That's why it makes people in some way invulnerable, at least I don't know, at certain aspects of their life. That take the woman who gives the baby up for adoption. Now, I wanted to talk about that. I think that more of the discussion, from my perspective, should focus around the haggle between those who are antinatalists and those who are basically pro-adoption, right? Because I think there the issue comes to a head. Right? I mean, if a person is an antinatalist and they're just advocating contraception and they really think contraception is the rule, okay, very good. But if an accident happens or conception happens and now you do have to deal with it, would you advocate pro-adoption or pro-abortion? Okay, so again, I think pro-abortion is maybe a bad terminology. People don't, instead they say, well, I'm an antinatalist. Okay, so, but I think there it is interesting. The selfishness argument, anyway, it starts to come up in interesting ways because it seems like the person, now we could say that it's selfish to be a parent, but the person who risks their life, okay, if you have a woman who's willing to risk her life for the child and then to give it up, that seems like they're enduring a great amount of suffering because it's meaningful and they're not really for selfish gains. Now, we might find a way to give it some sort of selfish spin there, but there does seem to be something there in the same way that the person who wants to adopt a child. And I wonder, now I don't think that it is, but I wonder sometimes, you know, could it be the case that and again, there's so many different strategies of guilt expiation that we're all participating in. I wonder the extent to which antinatalism can't be seen as part of the many strategies by which we try to expiate guilt. That is, if we say that just life itself is so horrible, it's it's not simply that it's a risk. It's more than just being a risk, that it's suffering, loss, hardship, death in the end, and it's unjustified and unwarranted to impose that upon another person. And then we say it's wrong to even impose sentience, and you sort of put it on two sides. One, the fact of sentience itself was the act that was wrong, or that life's physical structure, all of its injustice and hardships are wrong. On those two ends, the more that we can try to convince ourselves that that's what's wrong in the world, the more that I think we're trying to expiate our guilt. That is, we cover over the many ways that we fail one another, the way that we collectively and individually have failed to learn how to love one another, to treat one another fairly and justly, to try to make this world as humane and as beautiful and as harmonious as it can be. All the ways that the particulars of care, the actual everyday of care, seems to get pushed from the side, and that's not the issue, and instead it's about this fact of sentience and this fact of all the injustices. I mean, not only does it downplay, again, our complicity in all the ways that we, individually and collectively, aren't making the world the kind of place that it could be, should be, ought to be, but it I think it covers over, again, it's a kind of guilt expiation. It is a strategy that's among them, and I don't, how do I say it undermines I think the fact of meaning, that people do have horizons of meaning that make them still want to embrace the injustices and the hardships of life, and to try to make do. I think if we do go back to the issue of the person who gives up the baby for adoption, I think this is a person who says, look, it's the particular conditions of care, of thriving, of possible resources, of a likely loving, meaningful life, despite all the hardship. Now, the person who says no, there is no conditions under which life is in any way meaningful, and that the suffering over trumps the meaning. Again, I guess that is, that's perhaps the truly antinatalist position. It's one that I just can't understand, though. I think there needs to be bigger forgiveness, compassion, recognition of the world's shortcomings, flaws, the degree to which it's always been a horrifying place, but with the genuine care and love of others, good friends, good conversation, meaningful conversation. I think one of the things it is very interesting about the antinatalist discussion, anyway, is that it gets people riled and it generates meaning, because I think it seems to people to be an important topic. Well, that itself, I think, is very interesting, right? I mean, it does have some sort of meaning horizon in talking about these ultimate questions, right? The ultimate fate of humanity and life itself.